Heartbeat of Money. I'm Jon P. Moffitt, and today I am so excited. I have a beautiful woman here with me today, my wife, and we are going to talk to her a little bit about her new project that she just launched, which is Master the Wedding. I'm so excited. It's been a long project for both of us, and we are going to dive in and let you get to know 𝗄𝗄𝗄 a little bit and her Master the Wedding program and learn a little bit about how money is involved with weddings, dive into some of the budget ideas, even the high end of like what it takes to do a wedding financially. But more importantly, I want to introduce you to 𝗄𝗄𝗄 and give her a moment to tell you a little bit about her project, what she's up to, and actually, 𝗄𝗄𝗄, why did you decide to do this project, this Master the Wedding?
Oh, well, that's just a great question, Jon. Thanks for letting me know. I'm so excited to be on the Heartbeat of Money. This has been a long time coming. No, so I've been working with clients for, I don't know, gosh, since 2016 and really been doing weddings in the corporate setting. All that stuff since like 2008, which makes me dating myself a little bit. But over the years, I've really noticed that wedding planning in particular was actually really reserved for those couples that had larger budgets, that they had the ones that understand about wedding planner. And it just made me sad because I know those couples that didn't have a wedding planner and accidentally, make some less strategic decisions. They wouldn't necessarily be making decisions that they weren't necessarily bad, but they could have made better ones if they just had slightly better guidance. And so it made me kind of feel like, the wedding planning shouldn't just be reserved for people who have the discretionary income to have a very high line item budget item of hiring, a wedding coordinator for thousands and thousands of dollars. And I wanted to make sure that information was accessible to everybody. And so I thought that creating a online course in this new digital era that we live in could be a really great way to offer all of the information that I share with my full service clients at a fraction of the cost, and be able to educate those motivated couples who want to know and make strategic decisions for their wedding, to be able to really take that to the next level and do it themselves at their own pace. So I know even with the beginning of ChatGPT, a lot of people are reaching out to chat and talking about their weddings and all that kind of good stuff. But I even find that I'm grateful that my class, I'm putting it together and bringing it into the fray at this moment in time too, because I think coupled with any information that people might be exploring on their own, with my experience from doing so many weddings over the years, I think it'll be a really great way to empower people to make great decisions for their wedding, plan strategically, and have the wedding of their dreams without completely blowing their budget or making any of those little faux pas that I've seen people make over the years that kind of can end up really like making their wedding not be as pleasant as it might be.
So, it's pretty awesome because you have done probably over 1,000 weddings and events. I would say you've probably 25 million plus in budgets, from people that have just started out to people that have a $500,000 budget and do an event middle of nowhere. And so when you think about that, that's such a wide range of people. Tell me why this program and all the steps in your program are good for all the different types of brides. Like, what is the knowledge you bring to them?
Yeah, great question. What's cool about weddings is that even though each one is unique and has their own like special flavor to them, there are some really basic, awesome guidelines that if you follow through with these steps that I talk about in the program, it kind of sets you up for success. And you still have the opportunity to choose your own adventure in a way. So, if your wedding isn't at a hotel or it is in an open field, all of the steps and the processes that I have you go through, you can still apply to your wedding in a variety of different circumstances. And I do try to cover a lot of those different bases so that people kind of can, like, well, this one's really more speaking to my specific circumstance, so I'm going to make sure I follow up with that particular advice and all that kind of good stuff. But what's great about weddings, like I said, is there is a little bit of a tried and true process that if you just follow those basic steps, no matter, all of those other types of details, you really can set yourself up to be successful, no matter all of those little baby specific differences.
That is awesome. So tell me, you have 4 different programs, right? And it's kind of, they all fit together, or tell me a little bit about the different programs you have with Master the Wedding.
So this again goes back to trying to make sure that we're as accessible as possible for every budget, every couple, that kind of thing. So I do have my full signature course, which is the Do-It-Yourself Master the Wedding course. And it kind of walks you through like day one figuring out your vision, to your budget, to your guest list, all the way to handing off all of the stuff that you've planned to a person. I love it to be a professional day of coordinator, but if it can't be, if it's got to be your best friend or your mom or something like that, that's totally okay. And how you actually execute the day and even after the wedding. So it's like this full, huge suite of everything that you need to do. And I have that in like a big program. So if you want to just do the whole thing, you can. But I also understand that that might not be in the cards for everybody, or they might have already, you might be finding this program or be jumping into the planning process with me in a different, like in the middle of the planning process where maybe you don't need the full course. So I have broken it down into 4 different chunks so that people can kind of, I'm calling it like just-in-time planning, so they can choose where they are in the planning process and really just hone in on that specific product or that specific phase in the planning process to just give them like the little shot in the arm that they need to kind of get them over the hump and make sure that, again, that they're making strategic, good decisions in their planning process that's going to set them up for success throughout the whole process. So those 4 little chunks, if you will, is one is the Jumpstart program. It goes over everything from figuring out your vision, setting your budget, creating your guest list, choosing your venue, to creating your website, sending out the save the dates, like that kind of like thing that you need to do. It's the foundation of everything that you need to do for your wedding before you really dive into any of the nitty gritty of vendors and design and all that stuff. Then the next little section that I have is I call hiring your vendor dream team. So you're really going to shift into hiring the right vendors for your wedding. Not just any, vendors out there. It really helps you figure out like who are the right fit for you, who are going to listen to your vision, to your style, to your budget, all of those things to make sure that you're picking the right person for your particular group and your wedding. Then, and in that process too, we talk about every single one of the vendor categories, maybe even some additional ones. We dive deeply into design. We provide emailed templates, questions to ask during interviews, things to look at, contracts. And it's a really deep dive, very comprehensive look at every single aspect of the vendor portion of the wedding planning process, which I swear, if you hire a strong vendor team, that is critical to making sure that you're going to have a good wedding day. Because if things go sideways, if you've got strong professional vendors that know what they're doing, they are going to be able to do a little 2-step and make it work. So it's the best thing. If you hire strong people around you, everything will usually be golden. Of course, I can't say for everything. There's always like those things, but I have to promise you, those are the exceptions, not the rules. So don't let that feed into your fear. If there's any couples to be, engaged couples out there getting nervous, don't worry. Most of the time, things go really well on a wedding day. So don't let any of those crazy shows on TV freak you out. Then the other one that I have is the art of day of coordination. And that one's going to walk through all of like really the last 6 weeks before the wedding through the wedding. So all of the logistics that you need to figure out, how you gracefully hand off all of the planning to another person to run the day, which I know might be upsetting to some people. I can do it. I can run my own wedding. No, you can't. And you shouldn't. You should be focusing on getting married. So we always have to like hand the torch to somebody, which is a stressful thing, especially for those folks that have really like held their wedding super tightly and closely. So we kind of walk through all those processes, how to do that gracefully, how to set that person or people up for success, and all the logistical things that you need to work out with your vendors to make sure that you're setting them up for success so that everything can run nice and smoothly on the wedding day. And then we talk about also the end after the wedding stuff. I think this is one of those things that's like really kind of glossed over, and we shouldn't gloss over it. The post-wedding letdown. I have a whole little thing all about that. And that's just because, you're working on this project for a year plus, maybe. You're pouring your heart and soul into it. Every waking moment you've got, you're kind of thinking about different wedding things and how should I do this? How should I do that? And then all of a sudden one day, poof, it happens, and then it's over. And there's always this like big, like, whoa, that went by really quick and it's already behind me. And now what do I do? Like, what am I looking forward to? And how does that work? And so I really like to address that a little bit, because that doesn't mean that you're crazy or that, something weird. It's just, there's always a little bit of a sad thing that it's over. So I always like to try to make sure we're focusing on replacing those with other exciting things about the new phase of marriage and looking forward to something new with your new partner and establishing those new traditions and stuff just to make your everyday experience with that person be just as exciting as it was when you were planning the wedding. And so I really like to address those things too, just because I feel like it's not something that's talked about a lot, but it's an emotional thing that a lot of my couples go through. And so I want to make sure they feel supported in that way too.
Oh, that is so great. That is amazing course. I want to take it myself. And so this is online for everybody to download, right?
Online for everybody to download, and it's meant to be just in time, so for you to go at your own pace. So when you download it and pay for the course, you'll have access to everything. You can kind of breeze through it if you want to, or go backwards and, or just jump to the right to the place that you are in the planning process. I want to, again, make sure that it's easily digestible. You see quick results. You know exactly what steps to take each moment. So you don't have to like sit through these long videos or anything like that. I have supporting documents for every single one of my lessons and modules that are like kind of like cliff notes if you're old like me and remember like, oh, I don't really have to want to read the whole book. I just want to kind of skim through the highlights. I've done like the cliff notes for every single one of my lessons. So and if you can obviously watch the videos and kind of get a good foundation for what's going on, but if you also want to just jump to, okay, what are the next steps I need to do? I have really clear action steps for each one of the lessons so that you can rock out all of the planning suggestions that I'm doing and have some quick results and see success quickly without having to, waste all of your Saturday watching these videos.
Oh, I love it. So one of the things that we do here at the Heartbeat of Money is we really talk about the mindset, the emotion, and the spirit around money and finance during different parts of your life. I really love for you to elaborate on the impact of the financial decision and maybe a little bit, maybe a story or something that you feel people kind of go through when they go through this. I'm preparing for this wedding from a financial standpoint. What's your perspective on that?
Really good question. And everybody kind of comes at this from a different angle. Like some people are lucky enough that they have families that have, set aside money for their wedding and they have like a fund they can go to kind of tap into to help people get started. A lot of people I know though are just kind of bootstrapping it themselves, or trying to pay for it through extra money in their paychecks or trying to save money or using credit cards to kind of balance. And so my 2 cents with all of this is to remember to keep your wedding in perspective from the very beginning. This event is meant to be a beautiful expression of the relationship that you have with this really special person in your life, and it's supposed to be a wonderful opportunity for you to bring two families together, give everybody an opportunity to celebrate. But that's really what it is at the core. It doesn't need to be at a Four Seasons five-star hotel all the time or at some amazing, like beautiful venue that you see in the movies. I think all of us have been brainwashed a little bit because we just see these movie weddings and we think that those are like normal, what everybody else, everybody has a wedding like that. No, they don't. Most of the weddings we see in these movies are like $100,000, $200,000 budget weddings. I mean, they're crazy and they're huge and they're beautiful, but they're not normal. They're not normal weddings. And so I think it's important to make sure that we kind of get our heads around that you don't need to have this like extravagant, crazy wedding, that sometimes finding a wedding that fits your budget, fits your your time in your life, all that stuff is just fine. And you can still have a very meaningful experience for that. So I always like to kind of set that tone there, because the worst thing that you can do, I think, is sometimes really have this image of this wedding that you want and like stretch yourself a little bit to try to get it financially, because then what happens is you start to feel that financial pressure and it starts to take away from the joy of the actual experience of the wedding. And so I really love to make sure that people can explore that when they first are getting started, to find out what's their realistic budget that they feel comfortable investing in this event, which, by the way, I know it sounds crazy and it's like one day in your life and people have lots of opinions about this, but I do think it is kind of a really important milestone. And I don't think you should feel guilty about, investing a sum of money into this experience, as it is hopefully a once in a lifetime thing. And remembering that you're not just doing it for you, that you really are doing it for your families and your friends. You're giving them a wonderful opportunity to experience this kind of a joyful thing together. And it's just a fun time. So it's like, don't necessarily, cut everything back just because you have to be super frugal. Like there's definitely a balance there, but it's important to find the balance that feels right to you and you're not stretching yourself. So I always encourage people in the very beginning to make sure that you take into account all of the discretionary income that you have access to, that you feel comfortable spending on your wedding. So just because you have access to that $50,000 in your savings account doesn't mean you necessarily want to spend all of that money on the wedding, right? So make sure that you're like, okay, this chunk I could reserve for it. We can maybe put this on a credit card and get some points. Maybe mom's going to throw some cash at us, gather in all of those pieces to really understand where that budget is. And then once you have an idea for your budget, then start to dream and see what are those areas that you can maybe splurge on, that you can make look like that movie wedding that you want. But I think it's an important journey to go through all of that process to make sure you're feeling peaceful about every step of the way, and that you're not overextending yourself, and remembering that even if your wedding doesn't look like one of those movie weddings, it could still be the best day of your life,
Oh
and
yeah.
probably will be. You don't need to have, I don't know, I mean, if you can afford them and you want to, great, more power to you. But I just want, I'm speaking to a lot of those people out there that I think are more the more the bulk of the folks that get married, they do have a budget they're trying to stick to, and they're trying to be strategic about how they're spending their money. So just remembering, keeping it in perspective.
So what are the two largest budget items, and then what are a couple of ways to save money on a wedding?
All right. So let's have a real talk. So the real two things that you're going to spend most of your budget on, and when I say most of your budget, I mean like 70-ish percent, 75% of your budget is going to be on your venue and your food and beverage. That's going to be the bulk of your budget, which I think is really important to share with people, because when you get engaged, you're so excited. Oh my gosh, she just popped the question, or she just popped the question, whatever. We're going to tell all of our friends. Then they're asking, okay, when's the date? And you're like, all right, well, we got to start looking for the venue. And so you start reaching out to places that you've thought about. Maybe you wanted to get married. You have no idea how much they cost, but you're like, let's just see, let's get some. And then you get the proposals back and you're like, oh my God, like I had no idea that this place is so expensive. So it's like immediately you have this like sucker punch, like punch in the stomach gut, like, oh my God, I was so excited to get engaged. And now I don't think we can even afford to get married. But I have like this huge emotional roller coaster. So I always just like to remind people that the majority of their budget is going to be spent on the venue and the food and beverage. And sometimes the venue provides the food and beverage, like has to. So that makes it even worse. Like the venue even just feels like even more of a scary financial commitment. So just remember that those are going to be the biggest, scariest commitments that you have to make. Once you make that commitment, it really does feel a little more like it's all downhill from there. And mainly because everything else is not as expensive or as scary to commit to. And also, once you make the commitment of the venue, it really is fun because it starts to make things feel real, and you start to like see how all the pieces are going to fit together. It helps you really figure out how you're going to pick the right venues for your wedding. It really is kind of exciting. So just remember that don't let that sticker shock happen and knock the wind out of your sails for your wedding. Like, it's going to be okay. So here's some things that I like to tell people to help save money, because that was the second question that you asked. So first of all, with venue, I always like, there's two main types of venues, categories, if you will, that they kind of fall into. So venues either are spaces that are designed to do events, and by that I mean like hotels, event spaces, buildings that host events regularly, basically churches, that kind of stuff, Elks lodges, that all of those are typical event spaces. Then there's the other creative side of you, that the non-traditional spaces. So those are like beaches, parks, municipal places, things that don't always have power or shelter, but are beautiful, that kind of thing. And so you want to kind of first figure out, which category you imagining that you want to be in. And they are both like two separate categories. My 2 cents is to kind of make sure that you're looking at all of the costs connected to both. There's pros and cons to both of them. With those event centers like hotels and places that normally do weddings all the time, their fees might be a little higher, or they might require you to use their food and beverage, or their tables and chairs and all that kind of stuff. But because they do provide what I call infrastructure, even though they have additional costs in the beginning, they're higher than maybe these like getting married in your parents' backyard or your favorite park. What ends up happening is they end up being about the same price once you add in all you having to rent the power and the weather reserve tent backup and your tables and your chairs and all stuff for your parents' backyard. So just make sure that you're really getting all the costs for both of the options, or the options that you're considering for your venue, before you start to really choose one or the other, so that you're really comfortable with all the expenses that your vendor choice is making, because it really will dictate a lot of your budget. So once you've figured out what camp you're kind of going into, or which way you're leaning, one way to really save some money with the event world space is to pick a venue that is really beautiful on its own. Like, you don't feel like you need to upgrade the chairs or bring any different flatware in, or add a bunch of draping to the ugly ballroom, or, pick a venue that you just kind of like as is. That's one of my huge things, because it's really hard to put a lipstick on a pig. And if you don't love the venue as it is without a lot of additional stuff on it, then you're going to kind of be fighting an uphill battle. And I promise you're going to dump a lot of money into aesthetic and design stuff that maybe you wouldn't have to if you picked a different venue that has a little more of just like the natural beauty that you were looking for. Another thing that I would say, if you're looking for that non-traditional space, if you really do want to be like, I think, outside the box and do something at like a beach or a park or all that kind of good stuff, my 2 cents is still to pick somewhere that has had events there before, that still has some sort of infrastructure with, like, whether it's be the city that you're getting married in, or the park rangers or whatever, so that they do have some guidelines to help you. Hopefully there are a few places that have power. There's actually like a place to drop in. I really highly recommend, don't just choose like, let's just go into this open field because we have access to it because it's free. Not a good idea. I also would highly encourage people to, if they want to go that non-traditional route, to not do anybody's house, like your parents' backyard, things like that, unless they have amazing parking. They live in a really huge backyard place that's easy to access and all that kind of good stuff. And make sure that they are comfortable like doing large events at their house, because it does usually end up being more expensive to compensate for making the backyard become a venue space when it's really just meant to be just a backyard. So I'm those are two things. But the crux of it is, pick something that's already naturally beautiful by itself without having to doctor it up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, man, you are just a wealth of knowledge. I cannot wait to see your courses out there. I really appreciate you taking the time today, and spending some time on the Heartbeat of Money. I'm super excited for you. I'm getting ready to launch this Mass for the Wedding. Um, Anybody that's interested in learning more about 𝗄𝗄𝗄𝗂, there's a link in the email or in the body of the YouTube video here, that you can go to her link at 𝗄𝗄𝗄𝗂𝗡𝑠𝑖greenweddings.com and check out all her amazing classes and courses. Once again, this is the Heartbeat of Money. I'm Jon Moffitt, your host, and I want to thank you for tuning in, and look for next week. Our next episode, we're going to be dropping 𝗝m'C Bergeron. He specializes in the stress in the workplace, and we're going to bring that to you here at the Heartbeat of Money.